Well, it's that time of the year. It's the end of the season. This is our September garden tour. We're going to show you what we've grown this year and talk about some of the varieties that we liked and we will for sure try out again next year.
Stay tuned if you want to check out more.
So sadly, it is that time of the year. We haven't quite got our first frost, but we're really close. Some of our squash plants do have a bunch of leaves that have been touched by frost, but we're going to kind of show you some of the stuff that we grew this year because we think the garden this year was pretty successful and we're pretty happy with the way it turned out. Well, all the gardens, I should say.
Try to show you the good and the bad and talk about the varieties that did well and what will grow next year and what we're going to cut back on.
Yep, so let's just get started, I guess. We have a couple of sweet potato rows that if you've been following our channel, you saw us put these in at the beginning of the season, and we are going to let these go until they get frost and die off. And we've kind of peeked at some of them. We do have sweet potatoes growing in there, but I'm just unsure about how big they will get. So they are down here. One thing we did learn about sweet potatoes is that this sort of a trellising system didn't do anything. If we grow sweet potatoes next year, if they are successful, we will definitely not be doing a trellising system like this. Not totally sure what we'll be doing, but we won't be doing it like this. So at the beginning of the season, we had a bunch of what we thought were ground cherry plants come up in our garden because we've always grown ground cherries, and they tend to come up. Turns out, those were actually tomatillo plants. So last year was our first year we planted tomatillos, and we didn't know that they would come back so much. And the plants look pretty similar to ground cherries. Now we can identify them and tell them apart. But we ended up with a jungle of tomatillo plants over here. So we don't really have that many ground cherries this year, but at least we grew something. And these are pretty good too. So we have a lot of tomatillos all down this row. Some kohlrabi down this row. That did awesome. It's our first year of successful cucumber growing. One of the varieties that we've really liked is Biet Alpha. It's the Biet Alpha from Baker Creek. I'm understanding there's a bunch of different varieties that are all called Biet Alpha, but that's the one we grew this year from their seed catalog, and we really liked it, and we will definitely be growing those again next year, and a couple of other varieties also. Our cucumber plants are just about done. Some of these plants are not looking as good as they were earlier in the season, but that's okay. That's kind of right about on time. These two are Sweet Success cucumbers, and this one right here is a Biet Alpha, the one I said that we will for sure be growing. We did like Sweet Success also, but these Biet Alphas are hard to beat, and you can pick them a lot bigger than this size. So it is pretty remarkable that we are doing this garden tour right now, because normally we already have a frost and things do not look like this. So we're pretty fortunate this year that things are still growing. It's pretty awesome. This year we grew vining pole beans. We grew Seychelles and Vortex are what they were called, and they did okay. I do like the fact of having the vining pole beans. They're pretty yummy. Like, they're way tastier, I think, than our bush beans. So we will probably try some pole beans next year. But as far as, like, look at those. Those are they're pretty good little pole beans. Pretty good. Not stringy or woody at all, especially for late in the season. So next year we will probably try another variety of pole beans. I wasn't too thrilled with these two varieties just because they didn't germinate very well and they didn't produce a ton of green beans. Our bush beans that we grow, they produce so many green beans, and that is hard to beat, I guess. If you have a variety name of pole beans that you really like, please put it in the comments. We'd love to try it out. So this is one of the varieties of beans that we grew. We grew dragon tongue beans. They're cool, purple, stripy looking beans. They are pretty good when you cook them. They turn white, so that takes a little bit of the fun away. They didn't produce nearly as much as our other bush beans that are seed that we've been saving. We don't know the variety name, but we've been saving them year after year, and we really like those ones. These ones did do pretty well, though, and we probably will grow these again next year because they put a little bit of extra color on our farmer's market table. And look, there are definitely some I should get out here and pick before we get our frost. I better go grab a bucket. Back with a bucket in hand, and I see a zucchini in here we have to get picked. So these ones are called Long White of Palomino, these zucchini, and they've done pretty well this year. I will say, though, that people at the farmer's market want to buy green zucchini. So we will grow a couple of these probably next year, but not nearly as many, just because when people see a white zucchini, they just don't tend to go to it nearly as much as a green zucchini. As you can see, we have got a little bit of frost that's happened. Look at these leaves. It's just been light though, nothing killing. Something that has done really well this year have been all of our different eggplant varieties. There's a couple that we've really liked, and we're planning on putting a video out soon about all of our eggplant efforts this year because we have had some success, and there's definitely a variety that we're steering clear of next year, and that is the Green Knight. I'll show you it right here. So these guys right here, we are steering clear of these next year because inside they are just like, I don't know if you can see, but they're just like full of seeds, and every one that we've tried has been bitter. Now maybe we're catching them when they're a little too late. Like I can tell these are overdone. We've honestly just stopped picking them and let them sit on the plant because they haven't been tasting that good. And we've stuck with picking more of the other purple ones that we had this year. We had Millionaire and Epic, and those two we really liked. We had a couple other ones that we've liked too, but check out our eggplant video when we put it out in the near future. So this whole row back behind me is beets, and this has been a great amount of beets for us this year. They've done really well, and we've kind of just been thinning them as we've been taking them, and then that's allowed the beets that aren't pulled at that time to continue to grow. So we have some massive beets in here this year. Ooh. And I'm definitely going to need to think of some things to do with beets because I don't think we're going to be able to sell all of these, and I don't really want to can all these by the end of the season. So the beets have done awesome, and a full row has been really nice to have this year. You might notice our garden is kind of a mess with tomatillos in this area. Again, we thought they were ground cherries. They are tomatillos. We're going to use them, and that will be great. I'm glad we grew something that we could eat versus, you know, nothing. But those just randomly germinated in the garden, and we left them there because they were at an okay space to leave them, and that's what they turned into this year. This whole row is all those bush beans that we really do enjoy, that we've been saving the seeds, and we've had countless pickings off of them, and they've produced like crazy this year. So this has definitely been a win and something we've really enjoyed this year that we will definitely do again. We did stagger the crops out for these green beans, and that was a really good idea because it gave us a crop a little bit later on once the first crops had kind of stopped producing so much. So that was really nice, and we will definitely remember to do that again. Something we want to get better at is growing carrots. We did not do well in this department this year. A lot of our carrots went to seed, as you can see this one right here. But just, they are not as big and beautiful as they should be. Let's see what this one's like. Just pulling some random carrot. Not impressive. So we need to do better at thinning our carrots and actually paying attention to them in the future. That's one of our goals in gardening. It's always about learning and growth and improving. Another area of improvement is going to be onions for next year. This year, I messed up and overwatered our onion seedlings. I normally start onions from seed, and we have grown big, beautiful, awesome onions. This year, I overwatered them, and they all did not make it to transplant. So all of the onions that we did get this year are from little bulb onions that we bought in a little pack from one of our local nurseries around town. And they've done okay, but I've heard that you get bigger onions when you start them from seed, and I'm definitely seeing that this year. These onions are not nearly as big as they should be, or nearly as big as we've had in the past. I mean, you can look at some of them right here. These ones look decent. Like this one actually looks big for what we've grown this year, but they're not where they should be, and they are appropriately spaced. So I've been waiting to pull them until their tops kind of kill over like that, because these other ones are still hopefully growing, but that's not a very impressive onion by my standards. So next year, I would like to get better at our onions and make sure we just get a better crop next year. And that's just another area of improvement to not kill our onion seedlings next year. Swiss chard has done amazing. Kale has done great. There's a kind of kale down there that I will show you in a minute. It's called red bar kale. I think we're going to grow a lot more of that because it's really clean. It doesn't, as far as like bugs, it doesn't seem to really attract too many different like aphids and bugs like that. And it's just been a really pretty addition to our farmer's market table, and I've liked that a lot. So we're going to grow more of that next year, as well as just regular blue curled kale. I like that kind of kale as well, but it does seem to need a little bit more washing. So now we are over in one of our zucchini areas, and these are Rapicante zucchini over here. I don't have my scissors. And they grow like that. They're curved, and they have produced like crazy this year. So great remarks for Rapicante zucchini as far as production. They go nuts and they produce like crazy. But the downside to them is people see this at the farmer's market and they don't know what to think. They don't really sell as well because they look so different. So if you're okay with a different looking zucchini, this kind of zucchini will produce for you a lot. And I will show you just how big they get. So this one is the size that they will get to, and honestly, they will get bigger than this one too. This one has a little bit of rot going on at the end. It probably wasn't properly pollinated or something. But they get huge. This is definitely not the biggest one I've picked, so you gotta really pay attention to this zucchini, just like any other zucchini. You don't wanna let it go too long, or it'll get really big. So as far as the taste on the Rapicante zucchini, the part up here is really good, especially if you get it young and you eat it like right after you pick it. If you let this sit on the counter for a little while, this part will make the seeds, and that's where you need to scoop your seeds out of, so that's just a little bit different than a traditional zucchini. If you let them sit on the counter, they get less appealing, I guess, just like any other zucchini would, and the skin becomes a little bit tougher. So that's just what we think about them, but otherwise they taste pretty similar to a regular green zucchini that you're more familiar with. Check it out. Look at all of these squash tops over here, zucchini tops. You can see all that frost that they got, but I'm glad it was just a light frost. Otherwise, we wouldn't be out here today. Something that we have really liked that we added to our garden this year was these hatch green chilies. So they are called hatch green chilies. They're from, I think it's Sandia Seed Company. And these ones are called Big Jim. And we planted, I think, 36 plants. This whole row is Big Jim. And those have done awesome. I mean, look at these chilies. And they smell so good. And when you cook them, they smell so good. And these plants have produced like crazy. We have gotten, I literally don't know how many. A lot of green chilies have come off of these plants, off of the Big Jim. We did do another variety called NM 6-4, and that variety did not do nearly as well. If you want to see what I'm talking about, you can check out our video about growing green chili in a northern climate. Another squash that we've tried this year are these patty pan zucchini. I'll pick this one. It's kind of little, but I'm going to pick it for the sake of the video. Normally we leave them a little longer, but they're cute little patty pan zucchini. We've just been grilling these, and that's how we like to eat them. You can eat the skin, which is nice. It looks like you're supposed to peel it, but you don't have to. And those have been a good little addition. We will probably continue to grow these. These do sell really well. And there's also a yellow variety, which I wasn't aware of. So I will probably add a yellow variety next year also. The other zucchini that we will definitely grow next year is Fordhook, and those are just your typical green zucchini. Trying to get this one off without breaking. I didn't bring my scissors. They seem to produce really well, and they seem to keep really well on the counter. So Fordhook zucchini, we will add more of these next year because, like I said, people like green zucchini that they're familiar with, and this is a good variety for that. So this is that red bar kale that I talked about a minute ago, and you just kind of pull it off from the bottom to the top, and it's been a good kale as far as, you know, like cleanliness and ability to pick them easily, no bugs, all that. It's been great. This row right here, I think we did 7 artichoke plants this year. These are called Imperial Star artichoke plants, which we can grow in our growing zone. And right now they're all trimmed up because we just cut a bunch of them off. And that'll probably be the last of them for the year, but this will be in our garden next year for sure. Probably the same amount of plants or maybe more. So here's an example of some of the eggplant that we've grown this year. This one is the Epic variety, and I'm going to leave this one on for a little bit longer. But they have done pretty well, and we're pretty happy about the way they've turned out. Another thing that will for sure be in our garden in future years are Parks Whopper jalapenos. And they are just big, nice jalapenos, and they'll get bigger than this, honestly. But, I mean, like, that's a good-sized jalapeno. And we did a lot of them this year. My husband likes to pickle them and use them all winter, and we do sell quite a bit of them, and they're good in recipes, too. So Parks Whopper jalapeno, that's a really great variety of jalapeno if you want to try one. As far as sweet peppers go, Triple Delight has been a really good pepper. They're kind of just like a bell pepper, but this is one of them right here. I know they kind of look like a green chili too, but those have been really good, and people like them, and we like them, and they do sell pretty well considering they don't look like your typical bell pepper. They're really prolific, and they definitely do well in our climate. We'll be planting these again in the future. Those are really good and a variety to definitely try. As you can see behind me, we have some barren space. These were all potato rows over here, as well as a couple ground cherry or tomatillo plants, and we have dug all of our potatoes. So those are all out of the ground in this garden. We do have another patch in the back that has a couple extra potato plants, but that's why this looks the way it looks. We did also do some other plantings. We have some radishes in these pods right here that we planted after those potatoes got pulled out. And I know I've been talking about ground cherries. Here are ground cherries. This is what they look like. I'll show you the inside of them. We've already went and picked these up, obviously. They look like this. And they're not quite like a tomato. They're not really like a cherry. They are a mix between them, and they have their own unique flavor, kind of pineapple-y and sweet. It's an interesting flavor. If you've never tried it, you should try it. But yeah, that was a good one. They will just continue to come up in your garden, so be careful if you plant ground cherries. And this is what one of the ground cherry plants looks like. And what you do is you just like look under it, and like there's a ground cherry. They fall off when they're ripe. See those? So that's kind of how you pick them. If they are green inside, you want to make sure not to eat those ones like this. We've heard that that's kind of poisonous, the same way it is to eat a potato that has turned green from sun exposure. So if they're green, don't eat them quite yet. Wait for them to turn yellow. Herbs did pretty well this year. They did flower pretty early, so they didn't get as big as they had in the past. In the past, it seems like we've had basil up to my hips, so this didn't do super well, but it was nice to have them. And look, the bees. The bees love them. Great for the pollinators. Here's that other variety of chili that I mentioned, and this is about the size that they got. Much smaller, about 4 inches for most of them, maybe 5 inches. And a lot of them did also have blossom and rot, which we picked a lot of those off. Pretty much the bottom half of the chili had like a black spot on it. So we're not growing this variety again next year, and maybe just something to keep in mind if you want to try green chilies, this variety. If you have a similar growing condition to us, it might do that also. Our squash plants all along the edge here, a lot of them have been picked. One variety we will definitely try and hopefully put in a little bit more favorable spot in the garden are delicata squash. These are really yummy. They have a really unique flavor. It's like a potato and a squash, so it's a little different. We've liked these. They literally taste like french fries when you grill them and dip them in ketchup. So these are really good, and we'll grow these again, delicata squash. Other squash that we've really liked are Moorgold winter squash. I'll show you one of those. So here is a Moorgold winter squash, and I'm going to leave this one connected to the vine, but these are super awesome, and they keep all winter long. We will definitely grow this many or more in the future, the same amount as we grew this year. The other kind of squash that we definitely do like are spaghetti squash, and we don't have a specific variety name for those that we've really tried, that we've really liked. If you have some ideas for a specific spaghetti squash variety or specific butternut squash variety, I would love to hear them in the comments, because we are definitely looking for specific varieties of those two kinds of winter squash that will produce really well and have an abundance of squash on them. We definitely got decent sized spaghetti squash in here, and we've already come through and picked a bunch of them. I'm going to leave the ones that are in here for now. We're going to get them right before it frosts to hopefully get them mature enough to be able to keep in the basement for a lot of the winter.
This is our northern extra sweet corn that we grew this year. The soil we planted in was very subpar, and so we're ecstatic with the crop that we got out of it. We used drip tape irrigation, which worked really well, and we staggered the corn from some transplanted, and then some direct sown, and then another late direct sown. And the late direct sow stuff that I planted, I just picked a week or two ago, I think, and so mid-September, and we're lucky that we didn't get a early September frost like we do most years, because it might not have made it. But anyway, the corn came out really good, had a lot of double ears, with one really big, nice ear and a smaller second ear. So very happy with that corn and highly recommend it. It says 66 days to maturity, which I think is probably about right. People go nuts at the farmer's market here in Montana just because not very many people grow sweet corn. And so we had no problem unloading all of this to the local community here, and it was very fun to grow. Northern Extra Sweet is a yellow variety and puts out a little longer ears, I'd say, a little bigger ears than the other kind that we grow. Really good ears of corn that are extremely sweet, and it's super productive. And those are the two characteristics that stand out to this corn, and it's going to make it hard not to plant it because it did so well in subpar soil. If I do a really good job of amending soil and actually plant it, I can't imagine what it might do.
Well, here we are in our tomato garden, and if you're watching our channel, you will see we've had some issues in our tomato garden this year. It started out really well, and everything was perfectly set up, planned, and then on our fault, we underwatered our tomato plants, which led to a lack of fruit. It's led to a lot of blossom end rot, and it led to like stunted plants. So our fault, and we're going to learn for next year, and that's what gardening is always about, is learning. So we feel like the varieties that we planted this year did not get a fair shake, because we planted varieties that are like tried and trusted. We planted them year in year, and they've done amazing. And the reason we started growing so much stuff, and the reason we started transitioning to becoming a more of a market farm, is because we could grow so many beautiful, great, big, gorgeous tomatoes, and that was kind of our thing, were the tomatoes. So I'm really glad we have all these other crops to fall back on right now, because that has been definitely beneficial this year when we messed up our tomato garden so much. So we have had tomatoes, just not the amount of tomatoes that we should have had. Anyways, with all that said, there are some varieties that we know we like. Pretty much all of the cherry tomatoes that we grew this year have done amazing. So I pulled out the garden map so I can tell you some of those varieties. So we're not going to plant spoon tomatoes next year. That's probably one of the only cherry tomatoes we're not going to plant. It's just not really worth it to go and pick all of these. As you can see, we are letting a lot of them go to the birds. This is probably the only plant in here that's not really picked, and we've just kind of let it go. Tomato varieties that we have liked: black cherry, chocolate cherry, sun cherry, those did well for us. Berry's crazy cherry, we love those ones. We will definitely grow those again. Sun peach did well. Pear tomatoes, those are just nice to have. Sparky XSL, that one has done really well. They're cool, like striped looking tomatoes that are cherry tomatoes that are supposed to not crack as easily and be able to withstand a little bit more time sitting. So those have been really well. We might expand on those next year, honestly. These are the Sparky XSL. I want you to look at those. Look how pretty that is. And they're really good, and they don't crack as easily. Really good little tomato. I'm happy with these. We tried these out this year. They're new to us. So this plant right here is called Artisan, but it is an Artisan mixed seed pack. So sometimes when we plant these, we get green tomatoes that are ripe, that are long and pointy. Sometimes we get tomatoes like this. This variety this year, or this particular plant this year, these are really yummy. In the past, we've had yellow ones that don't taste nearly as good. So I guess maybe just think about that the next time you buy a seed packet that says mix on it. You don't know what you're getting, and maybe that's not the best idea to do, and I definitely had to learn the hard way about that. Another variety I wanted to show you that I talked about a moment ago are the Berry's Crazy Cherries. They are little pointy yellow tomatoes, and I know I said we had that tomato issue in here, so these should normally be a little bit bigger, but these are yummy and sweet, and they produce like big, crazy clusters in here. So like look at the clusters of fruit. And they're really yummy. Sungold, we tried Sungold Select 2 this year, and I think those did pretty well. I didn't notice a huge difference, honestly, between that and Sungold. It almost seemed like Sungold were a little bit more prolific and produced a lot more. So I'm not totally sure if we will just go with regular Sungold next year. We haven't really mulled that over quite yet. So this is what I was talking about as far as how prolific the Sungold plants are. Look at this plant. Loaded. We obviously need to get out here and pick a little bit, but it's like the best little cherry tomato. So good. As far as the other kinds of tomatoes, Cherokee Purple is probably our all-time favorite, and Bushsteak. Bushsteak tomatoes are little plants, but those plants are loaded and they produce so much fruit. We actually have them all in little cages this year. I'll show you them over here. So they are in these little cages right here. Bushsteak tomatoes, they only get about that big, but they are loaded. We have picked so many tomatoes off of these plants already, and they set some more fruit that is going to do really well, and I think we'll get some more fruit out of these before we get our frost. But as you can see, some of these tomato cages, I am definitely planning on doing away with next year. These little ones that we made a long time ago, these are going away. Our trellis system, as far as holding our cages up, if you could look at this run right here, we held the cages up with a couple of T-posts and a wire down the middle. That worked decently well this year. We didn't stake it in the middle with an extra T-post, which we will probably add next year to give this system a little bit more support, because we didn't want to put a T-post inside of every cage. That seemed like a lot, and that would be a lot of T-posts and a lot of money, and we didn't want to do that. So this was our solution, and it worked this year. But you can see on these little cages that we've had for a long time, these are made out of horse fencing. They did not really hold up with this system. If you can see down there, a bunch of them toppled over, and I'm going to do away with these next year. That's a goal. Another variety that we've really liked is this variety right here. It is called Sunrise Sauce, and they are nice little tomatoes. This is actually a sauce tomato. This one's actually kind of small, honestly, but they are very versatile as far as, like, this is a good tomato to just pop in your mouth and eat, or you can make sauce with it. So we've really liked these, and they do really well. They don't really tend to get that much blossom end rot. They put on a lot of fruit that's really good fruit, and it matures really well. And I mean, look at them. They're kind of loaded. Look at all these tomatoes on here. And they're just loaded throughout like that. So Sunrise Sauce, those are our favorite. We will definitely grow those in the future. Other varieties that we really like that didn't get a fair shake this year because of our fault are all the Chef's Choice varieties tomatoes. We like those. Pineapple, Old German, we will definitely grow those again. Ananas Noire, Mortgage Lifter, and then we did try a Supersauce, which those are big Romas that when you slice them, they are honestly good to just eat like a fresh tomato. They taste really good. For me, whenever I eat most Romas, I don't really like them that much. They don't seem like they have that much flavor, but the Supersauce does have a lot of flavor, so they're kind of versatile in that way. So this is one of those Supersauce tomatoes, and they are really good, and we'll definitely be doing those again next year. Canning tomato, or you can eat them fresh. Some of the varieties we will not be doing again next year are the Purple Russian. Those are right here. I'll show them to you. And yes, they have kind of gone really bad, but look at them. They do not look good. And they don't really taste that good either. So those are not going to be in our future as far as growing as a tomato plant anymore. Yellow Tumbler is another variety we will probably not be growing anymore. We actually ended up just not picking them all. They were ripe and they were ready, but they just didn't taste very good. So we didn't want to mix them in. They're kind of a yellow cherry tomato, and we decided we didn't want to even eat them, so we decided to just leave them, so we're not growing them in the future. So these are those yellow tumblers I was talking about that we just stopped picking. They're actually supposed to be a container variety, but they just don't taste very good, and that's why we grew them, to see if we wanted to sell them to people as container varieties, but they are just not flavorful at all. That one was okay, but nowhere near like a Sungold, and it honestly looks like a Sungold, so that would be not very good of us to just sell those mixed in with Sungold.
All right, we're back at our back corn patch. This is Lucious. It's about a 70-day to maturity variety, and it's bicolor corn, and people go nuts over bicolor corn. They love it.
They love it. They requested, it seems.
I'd sell it, and people would come back wanting more and more, so as far as selling, it really sold well. I've heavily manured it this spring with this area with 3 truckloads, 6.5 foot bed truckloads of manure, horse manure, and did really well.
And as you can tell, it's been done for a little while. All those corn stalks are turning brown. We haven't been watering it. This field we also planted in a staggering pattern so that we could have corn a lot longer, which was really nice this year. That did really well. So we'll definitely do that again as far as staggering the corn crops, because like he said, people kind of go nuts over sweet corn in our area because not many people grow it. And as you can see, we have a fair bit of weeds in there. So this is sweet corn that is not sprayed. It's hand weeded at the beginning when they're little plants. You can check out our video on our YouTube channel about how we do that. But yeah, it is grown through really good means that we want to eat it. And so we think others in our community would be happy with that as well.
The ears on this are not quite as big as the Northern Extra Sweet, but and the kernels are a little smaller, but I think it's a little sweeter.
Yeah. I agree. It is sweeter, I think, too.
We started about half of it from transplant trays, germinated in the greenhouse, and brought it out after about 2 weeks of germination in the greenhouse, and that worked well. I don't know if it's really necessary because this stuff is direct sown, and it did as good or better. Yeah. That transplant stuff came in a little sooner, which is nice.
Yep.
Start selling corn sooner in the season.
Yeah, so next year in the future, we might add a third planting of this particular kind of corn because we ran out of it sooner, or we were out of it sooner, and then we just had the yellow corn, and it would be nice to continue to have both for a lot longer. So we might do that next year.
Our two fields are about 300 feet apart, if you're wondering, for cross-pollination purposes, because they were pollinating at the same time, and we didn't have any ill effects from that.
Yeah, so it worked. It was kind of an experiment a little bit to see if we could grow 2 different corn patches on our property, and yeah, that's a success. That worked this year. So this is kind of our wrap up for our growing season. That's why we wanted to make this video, to just kind of show all the things that we've done and the growth that has happened this year and all the food that we've been able to grow. Like, it's pretty amazing looking back on it when I watch some of our videos at the beginning, to just like see where things started and see all the work that got us to here. And like, we were looking at pictures of the greenhouse the other day, and it's like, man, it was a long road to just get to where we are now. And it's been good, and we're already like excited for next year and planning next year. And we have ideas for next year. Of course, we say we're not going to do it every year, every spring. We're not going to expand, but we're expanding. We're expanding. We're going to do more. We're going to grow more stuff. We have plans. So it's fun. It's exciting. If you're liking the kind of stuff we're putting out in our channel, please consider liking and subscribing, and check out what we have coming in the future. Thanks so much for watching our final garden tour for the year.